Well, we're here to talk about Omnichannel. Your customers want to be everywhere, want you to be everywhere when, they want you to be everywhere. They want you to be nowhere when they don't feel like seeing you. They want you to be in certain places at certain times based on mood, based on what they had for breakfast, based on their preferences, basically whatever. And you have to, roll with that. And, it's quite a challenge or, really a series of challenges. And, that's what we're here to talk about today with this very illustrious panel. We have Walgreens, Staples, and SGN. We were going to have Dollar Shave Club, as was mentioned, but they're busy getting acquired for $1 billion. So, fair enough, fine. Although that would have been a very interesting, thing to talk about because there's quite an omni-channel opportunity, around CPG, selling online. That would be quite interesting. But anyway, before we start talking, though, I'd like to turn it over to these guys to introduce themselves, and I would encourage you not to be shy. This is a great opportunity to humble brag. So go for it.
Excellent. I'll go ahead and start. So good morning. Zach Barkus, mobile marketing with Walgreens. I have a background in CPG as well as other retail. Prior to joining Walgreens, I was leading mobile for Campbell Soup and their portfolio of brands. And before that, I was actually with Rite Aid in the drugstore side of things. So great to be with everyone this morning.
Hi, I'm Gwen Murray. I'm the mobile marketing lead at Staples. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with Staples. We are the nation's largest supplier of office supplies with over 1,500 locations. And my team is responsible for managing acquisition, engagement, and retention of our mobile customers across our apps as well as our mobile website. We work very closely with our product team to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward when it comes to in-store mobile experiences, things like the ability to scan your rewards card in store. And we've piloted some really innovative omni-channel initiatives this year I'm excited to talk to you guys about. And it's just great to be back at Postback again. So excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Michael Ritter. I'm oversee business development at SGN. We're a social and mobile gaming company based in Los Angeles. Some of our top games include Cookie Jam, Panda Pop, Juice Jam, and most recently we acquired TinyCo, so now also Family Guy Quest for Stuff is one of their top games.
Okay, awesome. So I do want to start out a little bit high level and just basically define omnichannel, because I feel like omnichannel and multi-channel are often used interchangeably, and there is sort of this sense that as a brand you kind of have to be everywhere, but that's not necessarily the case because it doesn't make sense for every brand to be everywhere. It makes sense for you to be where it makes sense for you to be. So I thought I'd get the retail perspective and then the gaming perspective. So Zach, maybe you want to answer that, and then Michael.
Yeah, I would tell you that our omni-channel approach and the way we think about that is pretty straightforward. It's customer-centric, and for us, it's wherever, whenever, and however the customer chooses to engage with us, whether it be with our services from a pharmacy perspective or what we offer from a retail products perspective. It's finding ways to integrate our offerings into any particular need state they might have throughout their life cycle. So it's more of an omni-channel. I think the multi-channel certainly differs and does make sense, but for us it's customer-centric, and when you start there, it's paramount to think of all the different need states and how you can fit into those areas and where your service and your products can play a role. So I think an example of how we think about that are things we've done with on-demand delivery services, trying to find the right fits and bring what we are as a company to our customer in that right time, right place, right space.
Great. So yeah, omnichannel I think is definitely a buzzword that gets used a lot. Multi-channel as well. I always think about multi-touch and attribution when I think about multi-channel. So it's a little different. For me, the term that I really like the most is one I heard from an executive at Home Depot who talks about integrated retail. So it's this concept of integrating not just your mobile, your online, your offline, but your CRM tools, your POS, point of sale systems, how you train your associates. So this concept of integrating all these different touch points, back-end systems, et cetera, to create that omni-channel experience is really kind of what I resonate towards and what I'm trying to instill from a corporate culture perspective within our organization.
And I definitely want to get back and talk about some of the technologies you guys are using to make that happen. But, Michael, you would have a probably pretty different, not hugely different, but a different perspective.
Yeah, so our approach, so we're more of our games just live on mobile
Right.
and also social, so being on Facebook. And so we're not everywhere yet, I'd say. So when it comes from a marketing standpoint, I'd say we're more of a multi-channel approach, actually more so than most gaming companies. But we're still very direct response driven. So whether we're buying just on mobile or we've actually tested television and running in other medias, but we're not, I'd say, omnichannel just yet. But as we grow our business and our games, which we're now turning into brands and ultimately franchises, we moved our marketing strategy to be adding more channels and hopefully eventually more towards omnichannel.
Right, and you guys do television, which is interesting.
Yes, we've been buying some television, both domestically and internationally.
Okay, and I'll get back to that as well, because that is something to talk about in terms of attribution, how you're taking spend from other channels and bringing it back to what's important to you, which is installs and re-engagement and all of that. But our session description called out this need, for taking the outside-in approach, where you're looking to your customers for the cue, as opposed to the traditional approach where, you kind of decide what's best for you and then you push that out. And that sounds really great. That sounds like something everybody should be doing, like get on it. But, how do you actually, make that happen? Gwen, maybe you want to start.
Sure. So yeah, I was outside in, inside out. I was trying to figure that out a little bit. But I think basically, the whole idea of customer centricity, that's kind of a buzzword in and of itself as well. I think for us, the whole approach of looking at the customer first has to do a lot with our frontline team, which is our associates. So we talk to them a lot to try and understand, what customer behavior are you seeing in the stores? What are their pain points, right? How does mobile play a role in that? So that's something that we do. And then also, in terms of the inside out versus outside in, for us, Staples is not a mobile first company, right? So that inside out approach is actually very important for my team to be thought leaders within our organization to try and instill, among some of our colleagues who might work in more traditional vehicles, be it signage or direct mail, et cetera, to be thinking inside out as well, right? And how can we push mobile to our customers from that perspective?
Well, yeah, and I think it's important too, like you're calling out all the buzzwords one by one and knocking them down,
Sure.
Not to just kind of reflexively do something because it's new or it's kind of what people tell you to do. It has to make sense for whatever your brand is.
Right.
But yes, Zach, maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
I tend to agree with Gwen on this one, and you will hear me say customer a lot today, because it does start with our customer, right? And I think from an outside-in perspective, it's almost reverse engineering and beginning with, I talked about need state a little bit before, but where can we meet them? And in any approach we take, whether it be strategically or from a tactical perspective, what can we build to create more efficiency, more convenience in how they can engage with us and engage with our offerings. So I think the outside-in approach is something that we've been forced to adopt as an industry because of customer expectations. Those expectations have really pushed us to change the way we think about traditional business models, I think in a good way, in a way that we are continuing to evolve, whether we're in the retail space, in the gaming space, whatever it might be. We're all looking to stay top of mind with our customer, nothing new from a marketer's perspective, but and understand how that fits. And from an outside-in perspective, I think the important takeaway is that if you start with your customer, you will find the right areas, and you'll be able to understand the friction points, the hurdles that exist, and be able to build around those. Because that's the important piece. With as much disruption that exists, it's understanding how you can build and find ways to reroute customers. Again, efficiency, convenience, and what is the value proposition ultimately that you're trying to bring to them.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a great question to pose to Dollar Shave Club. But all right. And I want to call out, convenience, which is what you mentioned a couple of times. It seems like, convenience probably should be at the core of any, omni-channel strategy or basically any strategy because, it's kind of like we were saying before, your customers want stuff from you when they want stuff from you. So is that a big inspiration for you, like just trying to be as convenient as possible?
I think it depends, right? So for us, for Staples, definitely, right? We are what we consider mission-based shopping. People come to Staples I ran out of ink, I ran out of paper. We're definitely a replenishment-based business, but I think there's definitely something to be said for retailers that do, call it showrooming, call it experiential, displays. I was just in a Best Buy for the first time in a long time, and they have a whole augmented reality setup. They encourage people to hang out in their stores. So I don't know that efficiency is always the right goal to go after, depending on the type of retailer that you are. But definitely for Staples and the business that we're in, it definitely makes sense. And that's where some of the tools that we have been looking at, such as interactive store maps, really are meant to help and augment that experience so people can find what they need, get in, get out, and go back to business.
And I want to be clear. I completely agree. Our retail model is a bit different, but I think it's important that you don't overlook in trying to be efficient, in trying to be seamless, in trying to bring these new experiences to your customer when, where, and how they want to engage with you. You don't overlook the things you can't control. And customer experience, is so important that I think sometimes as you think about some of the external partners you can start to work with, whether it be on-demand delivery models, whether it be new technologies. I think we're going to talk about beacons a little bit and some of the location players that are in the space. It's important to build on the best-in-class customer experience, and for us, that's where it starts. If we can't deliver a customer experience that goes above and beyond to deliver, then the efficiency gained likely isn't worth it. It's not worth risking a poor customer experience, to get it to them quicker or faster with a partner or a relationship or an external, new type of process that maybe we can't control start to finish or that we don't have complete confidence in. So I think as you build, for us, we are, again, customer. I think that's 6 times now. It's so important. I get to 10, then I'll stop. Someone wins something.
We could party and make it a drinking game.
There we go. But
it's so, really early in the morning.
It's so important to not lose track of the user experience, the customer experience, because that is the relationships in which our brands activate and operate with our customers. And so if you keep that at the forefront, and I think building these solutions, it's not always about being first to market. I think it's important, specifically in the space we all sit in, but specifically for Walgreens, it's more important to get it right. It's more important to, I'd much rather do it right and be second to market than be first and, have a poor customer experience. So we are always pushing the envelope, but it's about getting it right.
I want to jump in on this
customer go for it.
Chat, because we don't actually view our users actually really as customers. I'd say that sort of implies that they're all spenders. We're all purchasers in your stores. So in our games, we have players, and I guess that's who use our games. And we have people who spend money with us, and we have a lot of people who don't spend money with us. And so that's why I wouldn't necessarily call them customers. But it all starts for us at the fun level. And so how much fun can people generate from our game, and do they enjoy playing our game? And because it's a unique situation where we're marketing to get people to play something for free. And then it's the experience that you're saying that we can provide them that will either push them to spend to enjoy more of our game, or tell their friends to play more because they can challenge their friends and interact with their friends, and that lifts the fun value. And also, the more users we get into the game, it's a lot more fun for all the users to play against each other or with each other. So it's definitely a different approach for us in that we're driving free users, and then it's the funnel that we create inside the game that will drive them to spenders, or even if they don't spend, they're still highly valuable users for us or people for us.
So speaking of fun, and forgive me, I'm going to bring up Pokemon Go. Sorry, I don't know if anyone's Pokemon Go'd out.
Not even 11 o'clock yet.
I know, sorry. But I feel like, we have, people sitting right here who represent very different, aspects of, the industry, gaming and retail. But an augmented reality, experience could bring those two together, like in a very clear way. And so, just kind of curious, maybe starting with Michael, like how you think about like AR, and how that might even play into how you would work with one of these guys, potentially.
I love the idea first of the concept of being more active and getting kids out of the house. I think that was a great approach by Nintendo when they released that game, and it was actually a pretty big bet that people would walk around and engage not just on their screen and off, because we're so focused on having people engage on their screen that it's awesome to see that adapt and people really starting to enjoy it. We're looking at a great deal of other opportunities like that in terms of how we can engage with our audience both on the screen and off the screen. So yeah.
I mean, did you guys see more traffic in your stores? Did anyone get to capture any Pokemon? I don't know. I don't play it, so I'm going to sound like an idiot. But
yeah.
Go ahead, Gwen.
Oh, sorry. And not a direct correlation, but it's definitely something that caught our attention, kind of caught us off guard. And it was like, how can we capitalize on this? Not to keep talking about Best Buy, but I did see a great example from them where they put their phone chargers up in the front of the store, and they said, never be without juice, right? Never be without the ability to play the game. So there's definitely ways to leverage it without necessarily being like a destination for Pokemon itself to find your little monsters and all that. I'm not that familiar with the game, but there's definitely ways, I think, to get that brick to click, I guess. Click to brick, brick to click.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say, I think to a certain degree, yes, there's incremental traffic. I don't know that there's been enough that we're taking and putting Pokemon on a pedestal that's driving that. But I think more importantly for us is, quite honestly, the amount of partners and vendors that have reached out with a Pokemon Go strategy, that's not where we want to start. And it's more about thinking the trends are important, but I think Pokemon Go, augmented reality, bringing the physical and the real world spaces together, the brick to click, it's about a broader strategy that it can encompass everything, because there's a bunch of technologies that are at play here. There's a bunch of new games, new apps, new trends, and it's about developing broader strategies that, when Pokemon Go comes, and when the next big game comes, whatever it might be, or dating app or what have you, that we're ready to tackle it. We're ready to be out in front of it. And so I think that, yes, to a certain degree, if we see incremental traffic from it, people, right, they're choosing where they eat, they're choosing where they shop, they're actually adding in fill-in trips, they're adding in an extra mile to their walk to go get a character. So I think it's important to understand how that plays into our bigger picture. And for us, typically as a fill-in trip, as a convenience offering, we're on just about every corner. What does that model look like for us? But it's broader than just Pokemon, or it's broader than just name any of the hot apps that have come out or the newest trends that have come out. It's thinking more broadly about what is our customer strategy behind all of it, and how does that fit into it. That's important. I think if you get caught up in Pokemon Go or the next big thing, it's very easy to overlook ensuring that you've got sound foundation and guidance and jump on to the newest, shiniest, brightest tool. So
there are a lot of shiny tools. It's true.
This is ad tech.
Yes. So actually, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the technologies that you guys use that you actually find valuable. I'm sure you're all approached constantly, with new opportunities, interesting things, less interesting things, Me Too things. It's and it's a lot of evaluation and work that you have to do. But first, what's actually in your stack, and what do you find useful? And as just like a quick little corollary to that, do you feel like most marketers really know how these things work together, and how they're useful really, as opposed to just grabbing a bunch of stuff and making a stack? So yeah, Gwen, maybe you want to start on that.
Happy to start. We have a plethora of technology vendors, right? And I think what's most interesting to me, we use all the, basics, Google Analytics, what have you. Of course, Tune Marketing Console, give them a little plug. So I think what's hardest for us is not just our different technology vendors, but with our internal data silos, right? So making sure that our email provider speaks to our SMS provider, that speaks to our, last click attribution partner for our paid media and search. I think that's really where the challenge comes in for us. But when I'm vetting partners, it's always interesting to me, I can be pitched about, back-end algorithm, RTB, what have you. But what's most interesting to me when I'm thinking about technology partners is this person going to really be an extension of my team, right? That's what I'm looking for. And can they come to me and help me integrate all those disparate, different partners on the back end to help me come up with a strategy that is cohesive and that nails that customer-centric, unified customer vision that I'm going after.
Michael?
Yeah, I think that's a good point of how they integrate and if they're going to drive value. But I really look at if it's going to provide very actionable data or actionable engagement with our audience. Because there's a great deal of products out there that are all slightly different. Starting, attribution is actually probably a really good first step because connecting with your analytics and your users and understanding where they're coming from and how they got to you and what they're doing is an important link. But then how do you visualize it and make decisions off of it is ultimately the biggest goal, I'd say. So how your partners kind of get you to that endpoint is how I would evaluate it and look at it. And at SGN, we test. So it's also a good thing to do. It doesn't necessarily hurt to try something out, but test it in a small environment, see if it works, and then iterate and build upon that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just add in, I think actionable data is a really key piece that both of you brought up there. The only other piece I'd throw in that applies to us, a global brand who operates in the healthcare space, is trusting our partners. And so trust and redundancy. I think it's very easy to onboard new tech stack or new tech partners within the stack, and you find there's a lot of redundancy, but you might choose them because they've got one new piece or two new pieces. And so continuing to push partners to stay ahead, to push their roadmaps, I think it's important to grow those relationships. So you're not just onboarding and bringing everything in all over the place. But what I'd say is what's important for us, again, coming back to the healthcare space, is the data that we have, right? And you have sales data.
Right.
On top of that, we have patient data, and we value that. We have to, but we truly do. And when it gets into pharmacy data and things of that nature, finding partners who trust. Trust is a huge thing. Any type of onboarding is ensuring that they think about our customers the same way that we think about our customers, and that's putting them first.
So you brought up data time. So you mentioned some of the things that you collect, that is important for you, and you have to be very sensitive and all of that. But how are you thinking about what you're collecting and how that flows into the other things you're doing? How what you're collecting informs actions online, offline, that whole sort of flow. So maybe Gwen, you can start, and then I think Michael, you would have just a different perspective.
Sure. So, right, data is king. I think we all know that. For us, we see, and I've heard different statistics, but anywhere from 65 to 85 cents of every dollar spent in retail is influenced by mobile. So that's actually a really important data piece. It's a little murky, though, for us to understand. So how can we track what our customers are doing on their mobile devices, right? And then bring that into what we know about what's going on in stores. So mobile-enabled mobile influence is a big metric for us. And with our interactive store maps that we launched, what we're able to do there is not only see customers' journey through the store, but to see what they're searching for, right? What are our customers having difficulty finding? And understanding that data helps us bring to our brick and mortar experience, how can we better co-locate products? How can we think about product adjacencies? So there's data from all different sources, but we do a lot of consumer insights work as well, shop-alongs. All of those things are really important for us. It's not just about the hard numbers and the direct revenue, but it's thinking about that true omnichannel experience from a data collection perspective.
Yeah, for us, it's pretty interesting how we use data because we make almost every decision based on the data. even down to how we decide what games we're going to make, what mechanics we're going to put in our game. And with our current live game operations, we're using data to determine really, I mean, back to the fun factor of, we even have a fun factor KPI chart that shows
Excellent.
if people like certain levels more than others. And we use data to drive those decisions to be like, well, this mechanic is working, let's do more of this, versus anecdotal data. So I think that's a fundamental difference, I guess, of how we look at data and how it actually drives our product, which is, I think, pretty new nowadays, and something that's slightly different than how you guys experience and use data.
Well, and what about, because you had brought up attribution earlier, and you guys do run TV spots. So are you able to do any connection between, that spend and you notice, upticks in installs, or, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so we were one of the first ones to do TV and layer it on top of our other user acquisition. And it was interesting because it's hard there's not a direct click, so you don't can't contribute that dollar drove that impression. But we were able to track through both looking at the difference in organic lift from when we ran TV and not ran TV. But there's also a greater effect that we had to look at, such as how it affected our retention, being, do people come back and play the game more because they were reminded of it on television? So there's a lot more factors involved than just driving more installs and clicks. And we had to kind of track that across the board. Yeah.
Well, we're right, of course, and especially in your space, it's about re-engagement, and lifetime value and all of that, beyond just driving installs. Well, so now to talk a little bit about location data, kind of under the data umbrella. I know both of you guys, Walgreens and Staples, have done, interesting stuff with beacons, and kind of curious if you could talk about, some of those things, and then also what you're collecting through, the beacons or through other things you're doing in store feeds back into what you do in kind of a larger strategy.
Yeah. I'll take this one to start. So beacons, we've arrived there, right? I think that we have done 2 or 3 iterations of different pilots with beacons. I would say that from a data perspective, and I didn't jump in the last one, but any type of new data is always looked at as, what does it add? And I talked a little bit about data redundancy, but what can it do to impact the long-term benefit to the customer? I think beacons are interesting because now we can start to see things such as time spent in aisle. We can start to see things such as range and dwell times and what they're actually doing in store when they're at that moment of truth, in the aisle. So beacons add that additional layer for us, and that's been something that we've tested. The work we've done with beacons has been about extending the value of our current businesses within the store. Things like photo, things like pharmacy, things like beauty. Understanding how we can use beacons for more than just a messaging tool. Can they build into some of the operational efficiencies and capabilities that we already have in store? To understand when a customer walks through, right? Because our time in store, I would assume, is probably a little bit shorter than a Staples trip for a customer. Typically, it's in and out. We've got a set window that we can communicate with the customer. So it's important to use technology, specifically things like beacons and location, to get ahead of the customer. Understand, based on the data we just talked about, how can we be proactive about how we're communicating with them, the types of things that we're bringing up in conversation, and so we're not just starting fresh every time. And so that's really how we've approached beacons. We're excited about how they will extend the value and the convenience that we offer within our stores, and we continue to chart down that path. I think that there's been, in my opinion, very few that have figured out exactly how to make beacons work and go the additional mile for you. But at the end of the day, I do believe that beacons, done right, done correctly, they can extend the offering of the brand, specifically as a retailer, and they can add to current capabilities and offerings that we have. So.
Yeah, so beacons are a little tricky for us. We did do a pilot with some beacon providers. We used some third-party providers versus building the technology in-house. And we saw pretty mixed results. There were a lot of different operational issues in terms of having this app open and that app open and being in the right spot. And actually one of the things that came out that I thought was so interesting, and this did not happen at Staples, but that there's a real fraud aspect of beacons. Like, people will steal beacons. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Okay.
that's just a little logistical.
Like the literal beacon, they'll just be like,
Right.
Okay.
It's like the same as a Pokemon Go kind of thing, except it's, I don't know, you get points. I don't know why you would steal a beacon. But anyways, that being said, we've really looked, again, towards interactive store maps, not just from enabling the customer journey within our stores, but from that data collection perspective. And one of the other cool things we've done just to kind of take location a step further is within our Google search results, you can actually see if the product inventory is available in your local store, which we think is really cool and another way to use location and bridge that offline-online experience.
Yeah, we don't.
I mean, you guys don't do
No
pizza.
beacons?
Our users are all over the world, which is great, and we don't have to worry about beacons.
Well, actually, though, this is kind of just a hypothetical, but how would you guys kind of work together, say? Like, how would an SGN work with a brick-and-mortar retailer? What would be kind of an interesting way for you guys to merge your strengths, to do something, from an omni-channel perspective?
Yeah, so there's several different ways that we could do it, from whether it's some sort of experience in stores around our games, or using the Pokemon example, checking in at stores through these beacons to unlock maybe something special in the game that has something to do with one of their stores. Could be some simple examples, or doing doing some simple like co-op marketing together. Since we're I think we also want to reach middle-aged women,
Right.
so we can run some co-branded commercials together or marketing together, where there's some sort of tie-in between us and the stores and them in the game. Right? I don't know.
I think so. To your point, similar audiences that we're going after. I talked a little bit. I think the opening question and my response was, we always want to be in front of our customer wherever she is, and so if there's opportunity through the games you guys have for us to work together, then I think those are ways that we can create brand awareness, throughout our entire life cycle of the customer. Working with game companies and other tech partners.
Because they're most likely playing Cookie Jam in line at Walgreens.
There you go.
Look, if you guys work together, I want some credit for this later.
Absolutely. You'll get a revenue cut.
Certainly.
Well, what about the concept of a people-centric view? People-based marketing is just, it's another buzzword, Gwen. So I'll just but what kind of and we talked a little bit already about the technologies that are important to you, or the types of things that you're looking for. But what about really having them all flow together and work together for the people-based view that everyone is super obsessed with?
So I think people-centric marketing for us is a really interesting concept because we are a very seasonal business in a lot of ways. So our bread and butter is obviously our B2B customers. We think about the office admin and how we can help him, in his daily, life of ordering supplies, et cetera. But, like right now is a great example. We're in back to school season. So if we think about who our customer is now, and that customer-centric approach is all about mom, right? And we know from research that we've done that back to school is a very high anxiety time for mom. She wants to make sure that her kids get the right supplies, that they meet the teacher requirements, that they don't run out through the school year. So when we look at that customer-centric approach, it's taking what we know about how customers shop during different seasons, and then applying that to not just our digital spaces where we have like an online back-to-school center, but also how we're merchandising our stores to kind of join that up and make sure that our offers are, not just on digital, but also on our offline channels, so that we can really create that cohesive back-to-school look and feel, no matter which property they're interacting with.
Yeah, for us, I'd say we really have two different types of people we're targeting: new users, and then returning users, or people who've downloaded the game, played it, and get them to come back to the game. And I think there's two different strategies there and two different types of messages. And we've really focused on driving people back to the game on unique elements in the game, and new content, new types of features, whether it's, for instance, we have limited time events, which has really it's helped out a lot to be able to drive these limited time events, because then there's an urgency to come back to the game, and it's something new and fresh, and it's going to be gone if you don't capture it now, which I think is a trick from your guys' book of getting them into the store for this sale, which I think is kind of interesting how we've kind of taken that from a brick and mortar business into our mobile games.
And I would say my answer is pretty straightforward. For us, it's a phenomenal consumer insights team that has data, more data than we could ever want and use, but tapping into that as we make decisions. But aside from that, I think as a marketer, I'm a Walgreens employee. I shop our stores. I use our technology. People-based marketing is understanding how our customers engage. And what better way than, and not only myself, but we as a company hold ourselves at a very high standard. And so the bar is always raised to go above and beyond. And yes, people-based marketing, a buzzword, but it's about understanding, at the core of it, how your customer, how your user engages with your offering. And if you're doing that day in and day out, and you're always looking for ways to improve it, I think that's the approach. And again, aside from that, phenomenal consumer insights and using the tools at your disposal, specifically for us that exist within our organization.
So we only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to just pose one last question to you guys around just the challenges related to making all of this a reality, because customer-centric view and the need for this, the need for that, but then you actually have to do it. So we could just go down the line and say, what's still, maybe not working yet, something you're still working on, something that's still posing a challenge. I'm sure you're perfect, but...
Yeah, but I don't think it's perfect. But I think that it's keeping up with, specifically in this area, it's keeping up with the new data that's coming to life, the new opportunities and touch points we have, and understanding how they all fit together. Right? Just when you feel as though you have it figured out or you've made great progress, something comes along like IDFA and Google Ad IDs, and it unlocks a whole new capability to go above and beyond and now tie that in as an additional data point. So I think that, I see we're counting down here, but I think that keeping up and with our industry specifically, it's ensuring that as the new comes along, the technology, the beacons, the hardware, whatever it might be, that you find ways to fold that in when and where it makes sense, so that ultimately it benefits your customer. I think that's 10.
Yep, I would add right along to that. I think for us, it's finding what makes sense and not always chasing the bright shiny object. So, for example, AI is huge right now as well, and we have done things like implement chatbots, but where it makes sense, right? Where our customers already are. So things like Facebook Messenger integration. So I think technology for technology's sake is sometimes the challenge that we can all get distracted by. What's the new cool thing happening?
And I guess for us, it's really how do we break through the clutter? Cookie Jam is a perfect example. There's a lot of sugary types of games out there that look and feel the same. And how do we break that clutter? How do we drive a great user experience from both a technology standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint, and a fun factor standpoint?
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, guys. I guess the main takeaway is that it's really important to have an omni-channel strategy that makes sense for you. It's really hard to do it, but you got to give the people what they want. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.